Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be dispelling the common critiques labelled by Reform against Restore, and going over why a lot of the arguments made by Reform and the kind of establishment right in this country are wrong, and almost using this video for you as a viewer to use these arguments when they are made against you, so you can battle with the kind of Reform bots in the comment section. Because we do get a lot of Reform bots in the comment section, and I'm sure this one will generate many more. So, without further ado, let's go through the main critiques that Reform label against Restore and why a lot of the time they're wrong. Now, the first major one is, of course, that Restore will split the right-wing vote. Now, we've made a video on this topic. It did decently well for a channel of our size and drew a lot of controversy, so we won't spend too long on this, as we have a whole 16-minute video on it. But the main point is that we're beyond now caring about tactical voting. It's about far more voting truly on principle and essentially giving an FU to Reform. An FU to Reform for cucking on principle. An FU to Reform for just being part of the system with a brand new coat of paint on it. Reform only want to keep what we have going under a slightly more right-wing coded guise. Reform won't do anything to stop true immigration. They'll just make sure it's quote-unquote legal. They're not going to do much more than a couple of shitty cultural victories, like, they'll probably ban trans people in football or something like that as a big win for the right. But we need to say fundamentally we're sick of this stuff. It doesn't matter if Labour win because of this. It would show that we are willing to vote on principle. We're voting for who we stand by. We don't want this sugar-coated soft approach. We want real change. And beyond that, we have to just vote for Restore. Now, of course, the danger of the splitting the vote that Reform will make out is that we'll have a kind of lunatic left-wing government. Ultimately, we won't. I know it's controversial to say, but Keir Starmer has not been as bad as made out. Of course, there is still a lot wrong with this government. We don't want this forever. But it's worth putting up with 5 more years of Labour than 5 more years of Reform. Because 5 more years of Reform will just be more of the same, but it will be our chance of right-wingism. Right, Reform will get in, do nothing with it, and then it will go back again to Labour, right? That's just how it works. Or it'll go back again to even to the Greens, because they won't do anything meaningful with their power. We have to vote on what we want. And what we want is Restore, as they're the only party willing to make actual change.
I think it's not even that Reform will do nothing with this. Reform will literally it'll remove all and any credibility that the right ever had. If you want a quick cool one-liner you guys could use, you'd be like, well, actually, Restore isn't splitting the right-wing vote. Restore is showing what a genuine right-wing vote would be. That's it. Because if you're voting Reform, you're not voting for the right wing. You're just voting for Tory, Boris Tories 2.0 and them within a Blairite government, and that's it. Like within the Blairite system, let's say. So
the best frame to use is almost, we're not splitting any vote Reform. We're just the same as them. We're just splitting the establishment vote. That's the best frame. Now, the second argument made is that Restore have no kind of realistic path to power. Now, this has already been kind of sort of quietly dispelled by the success that Restore have had in Great Yarmouth, where a very centred local campaign did extremely well. One of the best turnouts and votes that we've seen in the local council elections was in Great Yarmouth for Restore, because their message was truly resonating with people. Now, of course, that was just Great Yarmouth, but there is nothing stopping Restore continuing on. They started 5 months ago, and if Great Yarmouth was the first step, there'll be many more to come. They just need to keep it going. It's a ground-up organisation. And if you are hearing anyone critique Restore for being small, well, then that person arguing it is already very regime-coded in a sense. It's good that Restore aren't given primetime spots on GB News. It's good because it shows that they're truly distant. They're against this kind of uniparty system that Reform clearly are. And when it comes to getting into power itself, it's not hard for Restore's message to resonate. Inevitably, as support grows for them, they will be given these TV spots. They simply will have to be on there. BBC will have to give them coverage. And given how pertinent their message is, any appearance on mainstream media is just going to benefit Restore, because they're arguing essentially what people want.
yeah, I think another point we really quickly want to critique in this case is what do they even mean by the path to power? if I highly doubt this, that anybody who's voting for reform is talking about the fact that they're trying to get into a Blairite state and make huge changes not only to the bureaucracy but to the overall agenda, if you will, of the globalists. And one, like I said, I doubt that's the case in the first place. That's kind of the angle that they're coming at. But secondly, is that, well, that doesn't limit their path to power. It might limit what they can do in power, but if that's the case, then that's also the case for reform. If we were to give the credential that reform is actually going to do everything that it's saying it's going to do. So it's not really a critique on Restore. If they were to take it from a higher angle of, but nothing can change once they're going to be in power, then yeah, surely you'd say the same thing about reform. Surely they wouldn't be able to enact the immigration policies they have or any other social policy that they have as well. And again, the realistic path to power is, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find somebody who actually defines what that is. If by path to power they mean popularity, like Christian Bro said, then, well, yeah, they started 5 months ago. Of course, we're going to hit at some point, a point of critical mass where all of a sudden they're all over social media, they're being brought on BBC, Rupert Lowe is having interviews on mainstream outlets. But until that point, like, realistic path about, again, it's an ill-defined statement in my opinion.
The third critique would be that Farage has national recognition, everyone knows him, and Rupert Lowe simply just does not have the same level of recognition. Now, this is obviously true. There's no disputing that if you were to ask a random person on the street who's Nigel Farage, who's Rupert Lowe, 10 out of 10 times they're going to definitely know Nigel Farage, and probably 3 out of 10 times know who Rupert Lowe is, right? There is no beating that. However, again, Rupert Lowe has only been in politics for a year as a notable figure? But he's growing. Where he is in our sphere, he is known. He's known to the right people already. And there's nothing stopping him gaining more recognition. And the key point as well is Farage is known by the British public. It doesn't mean he's liked by the whole British public. For every 10 people that you ask, 5 of them probably hate him. Another 3 sort of kind of support him, and you're probably going to find 1 true fan. Everyone that knows Rupert Lowe likes Rupert Lowe. And that's the difference, because Rupert Lowe's image is that of one of respectability. Rupert Lowe is a man of salt of the earth. He comes across well, comes across senior and wise. Frame that with Nigel Farage. Yes, he's known, but he's known because he was an I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here eating bull testicles. He's known because he was on Cameo saying sussy backer, right? He's known, but it's known. Do you see what I'm saying? He's known for being silly, right? Yes, he's popular, but that's not what truly everyone votes on. If Britain voted on who is most well known, then Wayne Rooney would be the Prime Minister, right? It's a silly argument, and it doesn't stop people getting into power. Who knew who Rishi Sunak was before he was the Prime Minister? Or Liz Truss, right? This doesn't historically stop people getting into power. Because essentially we only need to know about them in the build-up to elections. If anything, it's better that Rupert Lowe isn't as well known. It's better that he doesn't have a huge history of scandals that people can talk back on and a whole catalogue of errors to critique. Farage has an absolute ton. Farage has been around for so long. There's millions of clips painting him in a negative light. There are, of course, good moments for him in there. But ultimately, the larger your catalogue when you're being a public figure in politics, in a way it's worse for you. And Restore have this kind of fresh, new wave about them. They're almost a kind of unknown entity. And if anything, that could be a very big benefit.
It's like one of those things where if you imagine yourself moving to a new town or a new city, you get to almost recreate yourself. Anybody who was from your hometown might have a certain image of you, but at least now you get to create your own brand, if you will. And that's what Rupert Lowe has been able to do. Obviously, it doesn't matter what his past necessarily was because he wasn't under the limelight during his past. He wasn't on Cameo. He wasn't on I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here. Whereas Farage was. And it's almost imprinted itself into the British consciousness that Farage is a bit silly, right? But Rupert Lowe doesn't have that. And so the same way when somebody moves to a new city or a new town, they almost get to recreate themselves. Rupert Lowe has that fresh slate. He has this fresh chapter that he can write and therefore put his best foot forward. And he's doing it in the context of a campaign. He's doing it in the context of trying to win the next general election. Whereas when Farage was putting his quote-unquote best foot forward, it was for what? For money on Cameo during COVID? For money, for I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here? There wasn't a political seriousness about it. So now when he's trying to recuperate, when he's trying to move back, take a step back to take 2 steps forward, it's impossible. Because again, it's like Farage is trying to move into a new town, but everywhere he goes, he's bringing with him his I don't know, like best friends, and they're going to keep that same environment going, and they're going to spread this gossip about him, etc., etc. My point is that Farage has an old image that he created at a time where he wasn't maybe politically serious. Whereas Rupert Lowe, regardless of what his past image is, now when he's getting under the limelight, he's created an image and he's moving forward with an image that is under political seriousness. And that will wholly be beneficial to him in hopefully getting the vote and winning, whether it be the next general election, the one after that, whichever one it would be.
Now, another argument that has been seen is that Restore is essentially just the Rupert Lowe party. And there might be some credence to that, but this is a very, very weak argument, especially from a Reform voter, considering that Reform is literally just the Nigel Farage party. And we won't spend too much time on this point, but essentially, there is also nothing wrong with it being a quote-unquote one-man party. Of course, no party is truly one man. I mean, who's making the YouTube videos and all the social media for Restore? I mean, no offense to Rupert Lowe, but he's probably not young enough to do that sort of stuff. And it hasn't stopped people getting into power. New Labour was Tony Blair party. Outside of Britain, I mean, the communists were essentially Lenin party. The mid-century Germans were the Moustache Man party, right? You see, having a charismatic big figure is good in a way. And it's a very weak attack coming from what is literally a party that is Nigel Farage's, support group so he can realise his dreams of becoming Prime Minister.
Not only that, but if you were to take it even, more seriously, if they're saying Restore is a one-man party and Reform isn't a one-man party because it has all these previous MPs, again, as AA, me and Christian Bro are big fans of Academic Agent, as he'd like to say, is that should be a disqualification. That should be a disqualification. The fact that they've got all these quote-unquote experienced MPs in Reform because they're from Boris Johnson's Tory government. And because if we were to hypothetically go about the lines of this argument and say Restore is a one-man party, it's like, yeah, it's a one-man party of a decent, good and honest man. Whereas Reform is a many-man party, and many-woman party as well, obviously, with dishonest and scumbag, basically, politicians that we had create the Boris wave and allow it to happen. And so even if we were to go by their line of argument, this is actually a strength for Restore, not a weakness.
Now, the next line of argument is that, Restore are too far right and they involve, quote unquote, too far right elements in there. Now, this is obviously right coming from Nigel Farage, the man that, credits himself with destroying the BNP and destroying any kind of meaningful nationalist party in Britain. Of course, Nigel Farage would be the sort of person to say these sort of things. But again, Restore are arguing outside of the Liberal frame. So it doesn't make them actually easy to attack. If anything, Reform are easier to attack because Reform remain in the Liberal frame. Reform simultaneously call for deportations and national policies whilst being liberal and racially positive. That's easier to attack because ultimately it hurts what they're trying to say. Reform actually stand on a weaker argument. Restore, on the other hand, acknowledge these things. Restore argue outside of the frame that liberalism is just an inherent good. Restore argue outside of racial blindness. I mean, a key element to take is, I'm sure anyone watching this would have seen the Piers Morgan-Nick Fuentes interview, where Piers Morgan tries to attack Nick Fuentes on the lines of being racist. Nick Fuentes essentially just demolishes the argument by admitting to being a racist. And now Piers Morgan has nothing left to attack him on because the only arguments have to become logical and not emotional. My point is Restore have moved outside the frame and have owned it. And thus any critique of Restore has to actually now come from a logical argument. Given the solid groundwork of such arguments, it's actually a lot harder to attack them because you have to attack Restore now on logical arguments. You can't just attack them as being racist because they'll own it. You can't just attack them on being too nationalistic, again, because they will own it. They don't care about that smear, so it's actually a stronger argument to uphold.
I think it also risks muddying the waters of what the far right is for Reform in this case, because if somebody were to see Restore's policy and go, actually, do you know what? I kind of agree about this point I say about immigration, or I kind of agree about this point about the burqa, etc. And all of a sudden, by saying that's far right, Reform are admitting, like you said, Christian Bro, that we're currently under the liberal paradigm. We're currently under the liberal way of arguing. And so they're almost exposing themselves as playing the same game that we've had for the last 10, 15 years. Whereas what Restore are doing, going, well, that's not far right. This is just sensible. Okay, cool. Yes, I'm far right. What are you going to say next? And so by having this point of attack, exactly like you said, Christian Bro, it almost just exposes Reform for who they are, as people who would reform the system, not actually make any changes to it, and stay within this kind of liberal way of thinking, of arguing, of going about politics that hasn't been working and has only been functioning at the detriment of Britain and its people.
Now, another critique kind of coming from your David Starkeys, I'm sure Farage has said it as well, is that Restore essentially too extreme for a general election. Now, this is inherently a very Westminster bubble view. To a policymaker in Westminster, I genuinely believe that the average person thinks like that. That the average person is inherently kind of left-wing coded, not too far left, not too far right. They kind of view everyone as a quote-unquote centrist dad. Now, this couldn't be further from the truth. If you look at any polling data on topics such as immigration, in regards to policies like the death penalty, the British public actually supports these things. They support deportation and they support things like the death penalty. Restore are actually the closest to the popular consensus. It's just we've been so subverted into thinking that politics has to be this middle ground centrism, this kind of left-wing coded stuff. Reform aren't actually right-wing. Reform, if they were running in the 1960s, would be seen as just a completely centrist party. There's nothing radical about them. And truly what the British people want is change, right? They're not scared of these things, as a lot of people imagine. There are probably more people in this country that are in favour of deportations than there are that are aghast at the idea of them, right? Restore are simply put not too extreme. I'd even argue that they're not extreme enough.
And lastly, it's too online. That's their final point. Well, where is everybody? Isn't everybody online? I think we've seen this argument a lot, I reckon, from Farage and Farage bots or Reform bots, that it's online. It's just fringes. It's like the fringes of online politics. It's like, well, it's not. What does that even mean? If it's online, are you saying is that where most people spend their time now? Because the viewership on classical media, the viewership on TVs, radios, it's gone down. And what's increased is people viewing things on YouTube, people getting their news from, the younger generation getting their news from Snapchat, from X, Twitter, from Instagram, or like even Facebook. Well, everybody now is linked to something online. Everybody is getting their opinion, forming their opinion, or getting their news online. And so by saying it's too online, is saying what? It's too in front of people. It has the potential to be in front of most of the population. It doesn't really hold any scrutiny when it comes to being an argument. What they're really trying to say here is that it's not from real people. That's basically what they're trying to say. It's just bots. It's people who are extreme and who get loads of likes and shares, but they're not a real person. They're not going to go down and vote. They're not going to come out of their house. That's basically what they're trying to say here. But again, that's not the case. This is it's very Westminster bubble perspective of who is the online kind of a person in politics, right? I think you have a couple points to make about this, Christian Bro, regarding the Lotus Eaters and who is representing Restore Online anyway. But it's kind of like a silly point that if you were to ask them what the person meant here, they will just tell you they're not real people, to put it simply, or they tell you, well, it's online, but what are these people actually doing, or what? Like, they're normal people. That's who's online. So
yeah. I mean, everyone liking the post, everyone liking the YouTube video is a potential voter. It's good Restore have the online game down. The biggest right-wing channels on YouTube, like the Lotus Eaters, Paul Joseph Watson, the more kind of niche, distant ones, even ourselves with our huge 60 sub count, right, are pro-Restore. That's eyeballs on Restore. That's content in favor of Restore. It's boomerish to think that only young people are online. It's just not true. Your grandma is watching AI slop political content, is being informed just as we are by the online space. And it's good that Restore are winning this. In a modern age, any successful political movement is now actually likely to start online. Restore essentially did start online because of the online criticism to Reform. They'd been born out of it. If there wasn't an online, you wouldn't have dissident media going against the kind of status quo of the system, and you wouldn't have far right or far left politics. Online is, of course, the future. I mean, that goes without saying. But it's truly good that Restore can rely on YouTube channels, and Reform have to rely on, GB News. They have to rely on these kind of state institutions. Now, I haven't run the numbers, but I would suspect that the average, mainstream news channel doesn't get as many views as a Paul Joseph Watson video, right? It's better to have the eyeballs online.
And those are the 9 objections that somebody will give you to not vote restore from a reforms perspective, and that's how you can overcome them. But most importantly for yourself is that if you did have any doubts about voting for restore, now at least you know that these points are kind of silly. And the only thing you should be considering is the fact that if you're voting for reform, you're voting for somebody who's going to reform the system, a party that is going to just reform things in the system. It's not going to make a radical change, nor is it going to actually give you what you're after. You shouldn't be voting tactically anymore, right? Maybe this worked in 2010 when we got the split government between the Lib Dems and the Tories, but now in 2026, at the state of Britain, you should be voting on principle. Because once even our governments see people voting on principle, if we do, worst case scenario, split the vote and get another Labour Party, all right, and another Keir Starmer for 5 years, at least they'll go, damn, so many people voted for restore. Some people voted for this quote-unquote too far-right party. Maybe we should do something to appease these voters so that next time they can consider continuing voting for us. Ultimately, the game of politics is a game of power and upholding power and maintaining that power. And so if we, although limited maybe via democratic means, show that restore is what we want, we'll have to get some sort of appeasement. But not if we let reform in. I can guarantee you that, because all we're going to get is a Trump 2.0, but in the UK, where it's just silliness after silliness after silliness, and then nobody will think about voting the right. And if you say I'm on the right, you'll just get associated with, again, silliness, right? Sussy baka. Any other points you want to make, Christian, before we end off? They'll sign off.
No, you put it very succinctly. But yeah, don't forget to like, share, comment, all of that. If you have any objections, please write them down. We do respond to criticisms and, of course, respond to some of the lovely compliments you guys also put into the comments yourselves. But yeah, thank you very much for watching.
Okay, God bless you all. We'll speak to you soon.